Today we are in week 2 of our series Kingdom Builders. If you weren't with us last week, you can always catch up online or catch up via the One Church app. You can always find our messages there. There's also a Bible on there. There's a way to journal on there. There's a way to keep up to date with everything that's happening at One Church on the app. And so I highly invite you to take advantage of that. That's a great way to kind of keep up to speed on what's going on. Last week, we kicked off this series called Kingdom Builders, saying, hey, it's imperative that we have a shift in our mindset from defense to offense when it comes to our faith. In fact, a lot of times, sometimes we come to God with because we need help. The time that we come to God is when we have nowhere else to turn to, and we're like, okay, God, now I'm going to come to you. Now I'm going to turn to you, and it's everything. Here's everything wrong with me, and I lay it before you humbly. But I need your help. And God is so faithful, and He's so just that He takes our sin upon Himself. And once we receive that and we are following Jesus, there's no need to kind of beat ourselves up anymore because we have to shift from thinking defensively to thinking offensively. From how I get back to zero, how I get right with God, how I can get back to kind of even playing field. How do I get out of this mess to what does God want to do in my life and through my life? So this whole series called Kingdom Builders has this kind of subtext, this subline of, hey, there's something heroic that God wants to do in your life and through your life. And we've been looking at this from the story of a guy named Gideon. God has created you with purpose. He wants you to be a hero. He wants you to do something heroic. And last week we talked about how we need less celebrities and more heroes. And you don't have to be some super talented Hall of Fame whatever. You just have to be willing to live sacrificially and let God use what you already have. So we looked at a guy named Gideon last week. We're going to walk through his story throughout this series. But we looked at him, a man who was so overwhelmed by how little he had. An angel of the Lord came to him and said, look, I want you to take the little bit that you do have, and I want you to get it going. I want you to get it in motion. I want you, before kind of Newton was around, I want you to really kind of get this first law of motion going in your life. If something is at rest, it's going to stay at rest unless it's acted upon by outside force, right? And so he said, let's get this in motion. Let's get something moving. We got to get it going. And this has all kinds of implications, right? Like actually asking, looking for that job, or actually going on an interview, or actually asking that girl out, right? She's probably going to say no anyway, but she's going to say no unless you actually do it. You got to get something in motion. Apply for the job. Take the class. Get it going. So Gideon, he was overwhelmed by the Midianites. The Midianites had been beating up the Israelites for 7 years. They were bullying the Israelites. They outnumbered the Israelites tremendously, 120,000 to about 20,000 people, fighting men. And so they kind of come here. They could have come in and wiped out the Israelites, but they you know what? We want to make them suffer a little bit. So what they did was they burned their crops. They stole their animals. They starved them to death. Rather than just kind of killing them, they wanted to make them suffer. So Israel is 7 years into this tail whooping, and they're deeply depressed. They're discouraged. And there's this guy named Gideon who is hiding grain. He's hiding grain, and he's been emasculated. He's been, all matter of manhood or heroism or anything has been stripped from him. He's like, I can't do it. I got to hide what little I have. He feels like anything but a victor at this point. And the angel says to him, the first two words, says, mighty hero, the Lord is with you. Mighty hero, the Lord is with you. The angel, and we talked about this last week, had the first deal with him about his identity, how he saw himself. He had to deal with him. Gideon, if you always see yourself as a weakling, you'll never do anything heroic. If you look in the mirror and you always see someone who is a loser, who can't overcome, who has a track record of losing, or someone who just exists to smuggle grain for 7 years, you'll never get out of that. So he had to start with how he viewed himself. So he called him a hero. He called him a hero. Nobody else was calling him a hero. And the angel's like, we have to get you to start thinking something different. So he changed the way he saw himself. He changed the way how he viewed God. And he changed the way he viewed what was in front of him, the problem that was in front of him. And what happens next is that God is not only am I going to call you a hero, I'm going to call you to something heroic. I'm going to call you to do something heroic. It's one thing to change how you think, but now you have to change what you do. So he started talking to him a little bit about this, and so that's where we're going to pick up the story. And then the story is found in the book of Judges, chapter 6. We're going to pick it up on verse 25, and it says this: That night, the Lord said to Gideon, "Take the second bull from your father's herd, the one that's 7 years old. Pull down your father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole standing beside it." He goes on to say, "Then build an altar to the Lord your God on this hilltop sanctuary, laying the stones carefully. Sacrifice the bull as a burnt offering on the altar, using as the fuel the wood of the Asherah pole you cut down." So this has a lot of different connotations, and we're gonna unpack these two verses because there's a lot of significance there, but it's also a lot what was happening in that time period that we don't really understand today, right? We're like, what's Baal? What's an Asherah pole? What's this? Like, we're gonna unpack that a little bit. But here's the first thing I want you to understand about what God called Gideon to do. The first heroic thing that God called Gideon to do was to disrupt his allies. The first thing that he called Gideon to do was to disrupt his allies. It's amazing how when you want God to fix the problem down the street, that he starts in the living room. Right? It's terribly inconvenient. When you're looking at the Midianites and you're so overwhelmed by the massive problem that's there on the horizon, and God says, "You know what? I want you to go upset your father instead." I want to, it's a big problem. It seems counterintuitive. If you're already outnumbered 120,000 to 20,000, what you're doing is counting allies. You're counting them, and you're saying, "Hey, how can I not upset my allies? Who can I count on?" What you're not asking is, how can I disrupt those closest to me? How can I get them to be upset with me on this? No one's asking that. And so God says to Gideon, before you fight the Midianites, I want you to go and disrupt and ruffle the feathers of the people around you. And what he had to help Gideon realize is that Gideon misunderstood the problem and the magnitude of the problem. Gideon thought the problem was the Midianites, who were far away, who were on the horizon. Yeah, they were outnumbered. It was a big problem. He thought that was the problem. And God says, no, actually the biggest problem is the problem closest to you. The problem of proximity, the problem that's closest to you. Problems with proximity are extremely important to deal with. But especially when we're overwhelmed at the magnitude of a bigger problem. They seem like something that we don't want to mess with or deal with, but we have to. So I want to summarize these two verses for us here, because healthy fathers really kind of equate to protection and provision. Fathers, healthy fathers. If you're have a healthy father, they kind of equate to protection and provision. You're dealing with the father's issues with the core. With the core of who he is. Like, saying, hey, I'm going to disrupt my dad. I'm kind of putting at risk here my protection and the provision that I have. As the provision I have as a son. Fathers really kind of equate to protection and provision. Healthy ones do. His herd really symbolized the limited resources that he had, that him and his family had. Remember, they're 7 years being bullied. They are stealing their animals. They're starving them to death. Gideon is so terrified that he's hiding grain. And he says, you know what? We have a little bit, but we don't have much. And he says, you know what? This herd that we have, that's a limited resources. They were killing animals, so to have one was rare. And when you're in a place where resources are scarce, people take them super seriously. So what does he say with these limited resources? God says, hey, take your dad's 7-year-old bull, and I want you to sacrifice that on an altar. I want you, the 7-year-old bull, the most valuable of all these resources. God says, before we deal with the Midianites, I want you to go to your own family, take the most important resources, and I want you to kill it. Doesn't seem like a great idea on the surface, right? I want you to go upset your dad. I want you to take the most important resource that you guys have as a family, and I know everybody else is trying to steal your animals and kill and take, but I want you to take that and I want you to kill it. And then we have this altar to Baal. This altar to Baal is a false god. Baal represented an erosion of character from his father and the people of the nation. Anybody a boxing fan? UFC fan? Nobody? Okay, good. This is going to go over well. Boxing has been once described as a high-speed chess match. A high-paced chess match. There's all these kind of punches, and of course there's like this, the knockout punches and what have you. But have you ever noticed in boxing matches, or even in UFC fighting, there's these, especially in boxing, there's these jabs, right? And their jabs are purposeful. There's a purpose behind the jabs. The jabs are meant to measure, to see how far your opponent is away. The jab is meant to kind of blind the other person, because if you want to put the jab in front of the person's face, then you can kind of come around them with the other hand. There's purpose behind them, the jabs. There's defensive purposes. You're getting hit. You're kind of getting beat up. You're getting overwhelmed. Jab your way out. There's purpose behind the jab to kind of get past the other person's guard. And when you first go in, you see the other person when they're at a distance, kind of like you're on opposite corners of the ring. You see them. You kind of measure them up. You kind of see what you're dealing with. But when they get close to you, when they pose the biggest threat. You can see both of their hands when they're far distance, but when they get close, when they get past your guard, that's when they can do the most damage. And because they're close, they're in proximity, and you can't even see the shot coming from the side. They're in too close. You can't see the shot coming, from above. They're in too close. They're just wailing on you, and you feel overwhelmed. The Israelites were feeling so overwhelmed. Things had gotten past their guard. They began to let things in. Gideon's own father, who knew better than to allow false gods and idols into his life, did that because he was so overwhelmed of losing and failing and nothing changing, and year after year, the same thing, and they're just getting beat up. They began to let things in that they knew wasn't right. And we're all prone to this. You let something pass your guard, and you know you shouldn't be doing it, but you're doing it anyway. You tell your kids not to do it, but you're doing it anyway. It's what you tell other people not to do, but you're doing it anyway. These fundamentals. We don't want to let these things in, but we do. Baal was a false god, and Baal was something that the Israelites had let into their life. So much so that they erected a physical idol to him. They also erected the Asherah pole. We saw that in the verse. Hey, cut down the Asherah pole, take it, use the wood from the Asherah pole to build an altar to God. The Asherah pole, Asherah was the Canaanite goddess of hope, of happiness, and fortune. The Canaanite goddess of happiness and fortune. They believed that, hey, if we serve and we worship this God, we're going to be happy and we're going to be prosperous. We're going to have good fortune. It was a promise of something that could not deliver. And so then we kind of get into this idea of what is Asherah? What is Baal? How does that relate to us here today? What does that look like? And to answer that question, we first have to ask, what is an idol? An idol is anything other than God that finds itself at the center of your life. Anything. It can be bad things. It can be false gods. It can be things that you're embarrassed of, addictions, sins, things you don't want anyone else to know about, things you try to conceal, things you try to keep private. Or it could be good things that just become God to you. Your career, your kids, your job, your reputation, your relationships, your money. Not evil, not bad. It's just become a god because it's at the center of your life. And when it's at the center of your life, it becomes an idol. And we say, hey, God, deliver me from the Midianites. God, deliver me from this big problem that I see. I'm so overwhelmed by this thing that keeps hitting me from every side, and I need help from that. We want to solve the problem down the street. And what God wants to do, he said, hey, let's start with your own living room. Let's start with your family. Let's start with the thing that's on the inside. Because what's on the inside is kind of insidious. It's dangerous. It can eat you alive. It can knock you out. It can slip past your guard. And so God calls Gideon to do something heroic. He's like, I want you to deal with your own family. I want you to deal with yourself, and I want you to deal with your family. See, the two biggest problems closest to you are your identity and idolatry. God's like, don't worry about the Midianites. God can destroy them as if they were one man. In fact, he told Gideon that prior to this verse. He's like, we will destroy the Midianites as if you were fighting against one man. But you think the Midianites are the problem? They're not the problem. God can wipe them out in a sneeze. But if you seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, I'll take care of everything else. The thing that's most problematic is the thing closest, your identity, how you see yourself, how you see God. It gets to the center of your life. And, your idolatry, the thing that you've put in place of God into your life. So God says to Gideon, if you can fix the identity problem and the idolatry problem, and you can get all of that worked out, then I will strike down the Midianites. But I'm not going to deliver a blessing to you when you have an identity problem and an idolatry problem, because all that will do is exasperate the problem. Right? More money on a person with an identity and an idolatry problem just makes a bigger problem. Yeah. Huge blessings in the midst of these problems would have made it worse. It would have made it worse. God's like, I'm not going to bless you until you put me at the center of everything. So here's what I need you to do, Gideon. I need you to go deal with your dad. I'm sure Gideon was like, slow down. But Gideon does it because he's already been freaked out by this angel and by this voice of God. And, he's already been called mighty hero. He's already been told what to do. And he's already kind of been given this assurance. He's changed how he's viewed himself. He's changed how he's viewed God. He's beginning to change how he views his problem. And so he's like, you know what? I'm going to take this at God as his word. And he's like, I'm going to do this. He knows how big of a deal this is. He's like, I'm going to upset people. Because how many of you know that when you start messing with people's idols, you're in for a fight? People will kill over their idols. I say that figuratively and literally. Gideon realizes I'm about to deal with my dad's idols and all my family and all my countrymen and all my allies, all the people that are closest to me. I have no idea what's going to happen to me. And so he goes, says, you know what? Okay, God, I'll do it, but I'm going to go at nighttime. So he took 10 of his servants and he went at nighttime. And don't you love what God calls him to do here? God calls him to go all in. He's like, you know what? Just go all in. I want you to cut it down. I want you to tear down the idol. I want you to cut the pole down. I want you to build an altar. I want you to take the bull. I want you to kill that. I want you to sacrifice it. He calls him to go all in. I want you to tear all this stuff down. And the wood from the false idol, I want you to take it and build the thing all for God. Kill the most important of the limited resources and build an altar to God. Because as we kind of see in that symbolism chart, the building of a new altar actually represented a turning point. That was the turning point. That's when you see, okay, God's like, okay, I'll step in now. I'll step in now. Because this is where he found himself. Gideon finds himself in a place that you and I find ourselves in, especially when it comes to dealing with the complexity of problems that are close to us. We start thinking about not Newton's first law, but Newton's third law, right? For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So Gideon's starting to think through this. If I put this thing in motion, what's going to happen? How many of you done that, right? Like if I say this, what are they going to say back to me? If I do this thing, what's going to happen in return? Well, how's it going to be reciprocated? How's it going to find, we do that all the time. Have you ever been to a place where you know the action that you should take, but you're always thinking about the reaction? If I do this, if I say that, then I know she's going to do that. She's going to say that. So we start to dream about the future. We start to hypothesize about how everything's going to play out. Sometimes very confidently about what's going to happen. Sometimes we do it with kind of some fear of the reaction, and that fear of the reaction keeps us from doing what we're supposed to do. And here's what I would say. Don't let the fear of the reaction keep you from taking the right action. Because we always do this. We always think through what's going to happen if I say that, if I do that. I know that's the right thing, but if I do that, she's going to be so upset with me. If I do this, he's going to be so mad at me, and then he may disown me, or they may do this, and they may come back to hurt me, and so I need to be careful with it. Don't let the fear of the reaction stop you from doing the right action. You've got to come to a place where you are so confident in the right action that you're willing to deal with the consequences of the reaction. When we're preparing to move from Ohio to St. Louis to start one church, we we were counting a lot of costs. There was a lot of costs of what's going to happen. We were both leaving, Jen and I were both leaving probably the most comfortable jobs of our life. Financially, relationally, it seemed like everything was kind of working smoothly. I don't know if you've ever been in one of those jobs where you've been in it for such a long time that it's starting to be like a well-oiled machine. It's like, hey, this thing is actually working. I'm not even sure I need to be here for it to work. It's working great. We're doing okay. And we feel like God said, hey, you know what? I want you to start a church, not here, but somewhere else. We didn't know where that was, so we started counting the costs. When we find out it was St. Louis, we're like, okay, we're going to leave friends, everybody that, all of our family. We don't know anybody there. How are we going to do this? We're going to tell people. I had people tell me that, hey, you should do it right here, because if you do it right here, you're going to have so many more people. I'm like, you're probably right, but we're not called to do it right there. And I think about that. I think about, what if I would have done it, what if we would have started a church where I was in the middle of all kinds of friends and family and a city that I knew and all kinds of different things? Would it have been easier? Yes. Would we have more people? Probably. Would it have taken off quicker? Probably. But was that the right action? No. So there's a proper way. Like you should count the cost before doing something, but you can't let the reaction keep you from doing the right action, whether it's good or whether it's bad. Sometimes we'll do things, we're like, you know what, that's going to have a positive reaction, but it's not the right thing to do. And so while it may be positive temporarily, it's not what you were supposed to do. So Gideon's at this place where he's like, you know what, I could die here. I'm about to out my dad in front of the whole community. I'm going to tear down his idol, kill his most prized possession. And I'm not even sure my dad's going to have my back. There may have come a moment where his father became so overwhelmed at the humiliation of his son that he leaves his son hanging out to dry. Right? This could have happened. I'm sure that was kind of going through Gideon's mind. Gideon knew that he was going to mess with the idol of the community. He knew he was going to be in big trouble. And when you get to a place where you think of all the reactions and you think, you know what? I don't have control of that. I'm not going to wait until I'm super sure about all the reaction. I'm just going to do it. Because if you wait and you sit around until you are super certain about how everything is going to pan out before you actually take a step, you'll never take that step, right? Yeah. You'll never take that, like all the different situations, whether it's relationally or financially or emotionally, like everything kind of be perfectly set up for you, it probably won't happen. And if you're just sitting around waiting for that perfect moment, you can't do that. Just do the right action. What has God put in front of you to do? So Gideon's like, I'm going to deal with my identity. I'm going to deal with my idolatry. If that means I have to ruffle some feathers, so be it. I'm going to decide what's God telling me to do right now. And if God is telling you, like he told Gideon, I'm going with you, and Gideon comes to a place where he's like, you know what? Bad things probably most likely are going to happen to me, but you know what? I'm going to do it anyway. If my dad kills me, if the people of the town kill me, then they do. But I'm going to do what's right. I don't have control of the reaction. I only have control of the action. Some of you have been crippled in action because you're so worried about the reaction. What are they going to say? What are they going to do? How's it going to go? What's going to happen? And if that happens, then what's going to happen next? And it's paralysis by analysis. It's just this idea of where I'm just not going to move until I have everything completely figured out, where I know everybody's reaction and I'm okay with it. Let me just simplify it. You do the right action and just let the chips fall where they may. This is what happens. He goes and he does it. He does it at night. He tears the stuff down. He destroys the altar to Baal. He goes and gets the 7-year-old bull. He kills it. He builds an altar to God. And guess what happens? A bunch of people want to kill him. They get up the next morning and they say, who did this? They did their research and they found out it was Gideon, and the town is like just a mess. They're like, we're going to kill him. We are going to kill them. By the way, not everybody in your life is going to be excited about your newfound courage. some people like a doormat. Some people love being able to manipulate you for years. And when you stand up and you kind of put a little steel in your backbone and you stand up and you tear down the idol and you tear down and you build an altar to God, not everyone's going to be there to applaud you. They liked you when they could run over you. But now you're courageous. Now you're starting to step out in a heroic way. You're a hero, and all I can do is the right action, and the right action. And if you want to mess up on your reaction, that's on you. Not everyone's excited about that. Not everyone's going to affirm you for that. But you can't live for their affirmation, right? You have to live for his affirmation. You have to do the right thing. Gideon stepped out, and he did it, and a bunch of people wanted to kill him for it. And one person, his dad, had a turning point. His father all of a sudden realized, you know what? I was wrong. I let some things inside my guard. I did some things I shouldn't have done. I built altars to Baal. And his father stands up on his behalf and says to the whole community, says to the men of the town, listen, he's right, I'm wrong. I don't know how, but I got off course, and I'm wrong. If you want to stand up for Baal, go ahead. You'll be standing against God. And a whole bunch of people wanted to kill him, but the one closest to him, his father, had a turning point, and all of a sudden now they started to have some alignment, him and his dad. There's a vision. There's a big vision in front of you. Something God wants to do through you. The Midianites represent something for you, a big problem, a massive problem. But the first thing God wants you to do, the first courageous thing God calls you into is to deal with the problems closest to you. That it could be that biggest problem could be one of your allies. It could be among your allies. It could be among your family. It could be among yourself. It could be among your friends. Could be the one among your marriage, the one among your family, the one in your own mind, the one in your business, the one in the people that you trust the most. But we have to be willing to first address our idols. Let me tell you how you know you have an idol. It's the thing that you get most defensive about. Whenever you get most offensive, whatever you get most offensive about, when someone reaches out their hand to touch it and you just slap it away. Like, don't touch that. Don't do that. That's your idol. That thing that when your spouse brings it up, you get very defensive. You're defending and you're guarding, and to keep something hidden, it's either an identity issue or an idolatry issue. It's too important. They don't even want to bring it up because they know that you'll fight tooth and nail over it. You'll even kill relationships over it. It's too important. That's your biggest problem. That's the one closest to you. That's how you know if you have an idol. It's not the Midianites. It's not the problem down the street. It's the problem in your living room. It's the problem closest to you. If you'll have the courage to deal with your identity and your idolatry, the massive problem, the one down the street, the vision that God has given you will fall. But you have to deal with you. God had to help Gideon and the entire nation of Israel to see what the real problem was. And he's like, you know what? You have to have the courage to clean house. You have to have the courage to clean house. And so as we kind of wrap up today, I want to give you some questions to wrestle with, honestly and courageously. These are questions that we're going to spend some time in reflection today. But I want you to think about these things honestly, courageously, and really, may be able to answer these things. You may not be able to do it right now, but let's at least spend some time doing it. The first one is this: what problem is closest to you right now? What problem is closest to you right now? Deal with that one first. Deal with that one first. What dangerous thing has gotten past your guard? Gotten past your defenses? What's something you know wasn't right or isn't right? You kind of let slip in, but you're like, man, you're right. I'm wrong. I gotta really push this thing back. What dangerous thing has gotten past your defenses? What issue or issues make you especially defensive? What do people bring up and you don't want to hear it? And if you're being totally honest, you know you're wrong, but you get ultra defensive about it. What action have you delayed for fear of the reaction? And the last one is this: what idol needs dealt with? And when are you going to deal with it? When are you going to deal with it? Today? Tomorrow? See, God has created you to be a hero, and if your vision for life right now is just in survival mode, just trying to make it through, I'm just barely making it, if you're living in this place of neutral, that's not God's intention for you. You've got to do it His way, and you've got to deal with these things that are on you that slip past your guard. And it's okay. I've been there, but we have to deal with it. And you have to have the courage to clean house. It creates tremendous courage when you do that, and God will now bless you, and here's what you'll find. You'll start to find alignment, and you'll start to find freedom, and you'll start to find that, what you'll start to find is you're going to start to see God moving powerfully in your life, and you're going to be like, this is real. This power is real. Maybe if God is for me, then no one can stand against me. Maybe it's not just Jason getting up there every week and just kind of bumping his gum and talking. Maybe this thing is really real. Maybe there's really power for me to overcome. Maybe I can do it. Maybe I am a hero. Maybe I can be sacrificial. Maybe I can be free. But you've got to deal with the stuff closest to you. You do that. You do what only you can do, and He will do what only He can do. Let me pray for you this morning. Father,